Well, welcome to this another edition of our celebration of Sukah. This is actually the first day of Sukah here in 2025. It is year 5992. Yeah, we have 8 years until the final celebration of Sukah will transpire, beginning on the 7th of October in 2033. In that, our program yesterday was devoted to something that I think is really quite profound, which is that the celebration of Sukah, or as the rabbis want to call it, Sukkoth, but that's not how it's written in the text, is not about building huts. It's not about building and living in booths. It's not about being exposed to the elements or pitching tents. Sukah is about one thing, and one thing only. And we know this because Yahweh has stated emphatically that the 7 steps that he has outlined, which enable us to walk to him, go through a process that lead in a direction. The doorway that we begin this journey is called Pesach. It is the doorway to life eternal. It is a gift that God's beloved Son, Dod, enabled by fulfilling it in year 4000 Yah. The next step along that way is across that threshold of matzah, where our religious and political guilt are expunged, where the fungus that is the yeast of religious and political interpretations, false gods, is watched from us so that we appear perfect before God. Now, this part of Chag Matzah is so essential to this story because as I'm going to transition into what occurred in Eden as we arrive in Eden through these Mow'ed Miqra, the only way for us to feel comfortable, exposed to God, in God's presence, is to have our guilt removed. You see, when the children of Israel were first exposed to God, it was at the base of Mount Choreb, very, very early on during the Exodus process. They hadn't even left Choreb at this point. And Yahweh said, Moshe, I'm going to give you 3 days to get the children of Israel all prepared, cleaned up, dressed up, mind in the right place for me to come with my light, my fiery light, off of this mountain so that I appear before and speak directly to them. And he did. And they were horrified. Not horrified by God. God's beautiful. His voice, that fiery light, would have been the essence of, imagine the fire that we had last night, and so many of others are burning these fires by engaging in what God requested of us on the Mow'ed Miqra, like on Kippurim and again on Sukah, to come into his presence through the transformative nature of this fire. So God's fire would have been absolutely radiant and gorgeous. His voice, the tenor of it, transformative, warming, reassuring. And yet the children of Israel said, no, it's as if you're killing us. We would just as soon die as to have to be exposed to this again. Why? It has all to do with them, not God. It wasn't God's booming voice. It wasn't God's brilliant light. It was the darkness that was lurking in them. They were still very religious. They were still exceedingly corrupt. They did not genuinely know Yahweh. They hadn't accepted the terms and conditions of the covenant. They were not covenant. They had no concept what the purpose of the 7 Mow'ed Miqra were, and there had been a dress rehearsal for them, and they didn't even process that the purpose of matzah was to free them from religious and political corruption. They did not understand that. And so they were still rife with the fungus of yeast inside of them. And that's the reason that they felt so naked and exposed. Doesn't matter what they were wearing. They could have been in burqas. They could have had 18 different layers of tents over them. They could have been what we call as boys dating a triple bagger. Just in case one bag fell off, you had another. That's what transpired there. They were ashamed of who they were. They were not prepared to be in God's presence. And they told him to go away, to shut up. They never wanted to see him again. And we're witnessing that again now, even in our midst. All right, so the purpose of matzah is to prepare us on the inside, prepare our souls to be exposed to Yahweh and feel wonderful and comfortable in his presence. I've shared this many times with you, but I have a very uncommonly comfortable relationship with Yahweh. I do not worship him. I'm very comfortable in his presence. I view our relationship as that of coworkers. I see him more as my father than I do as my boss, although I know him to be God and he is my boss, and his way prevails in my life. I listen to him. He does not need to listen to me. And that being the case, I have always been exceedingly comfortable and totally open around God. And the reason for that is not because I'm perfect. I've got flaws like everyone else. The reason that I'm comfortable about Yahweh is that I know there's nothing in me that he sees that he is uncomfortable with. There's no reason for me to be shamed in any way, because we do so much wonderful and productive and beneficial together that what God is saying is the excitement, the joy of being able to work with someone who is totally devoted, completely steadfast and loyal to him, who is using his brain to examine what God has shared with us and to think it through and to learn and to come to understand, who is excited to share with you what he's come to see as insights from our Creator. And God sees that. And he sees that he's laid out this beautiful portrait for us. And for the first time, it's all framed and put together from the right vantage point so that his people might understand him for the very first time. God's thrilled with that. And all the while, he doesn't see anything that is wrong with our relationship. I can be completely transparent and open and comfortable in his presence, and I can radiate that to you, which is the very reason that we've gone from exclusively writing to him wanting us to do this blog. I'm surrounded by like 10 panel lights, studio lights at the moment. The lens is wide open. Rich sets the show on live stream. We live stream it to like 12 different platforms simultaneously. I'm totally exposed to you. There's nothing between me and those lights, between me and that camera, between me and you. Nothing. And yet I've told you, at no time have I ever been at the least bit nervous to do this, the least bit uncomfortable in doing this. The only time I actually felt any nervousness is when my good friends were doing the show here less than a week ago, where they wanted to have the opportunity to respond to a numbskull that had decided to vomit all over herself on the way out of the garden. And I was nervous because I knew that none of them were as practiced, really, as comfortable doing this as I had become. And as turned out, they were marvelous individually and together. But, kind of, you feel like a little bit of a dad in this covenant relationship, even though there's members of the covenant that are as old or older than I am. which is, I date back to the dinosaur age, prior to internet. And so you feel a sense of pride in what they're doing and enjoy for what they're able to do. And yet there's this sense of nervousness. This is my kid. I want him to do well. But as for me, you are witnessing how this all works. I think there's only one time, Rich, in all the time you've been now here for months, we've done this. There's only one time you have seen me actually prepare for a show. Only once.
Yeah.
And I asked you a few days ago, I said, would you mind coming in, staying here in the office for a moment? I want to read through the text of what Yahowah had to say about Sukah. I want to make certain that we know exactly where he is going, because I have this insight now, which says there's no tent associated with Sukah. And before we make that statement, let's just make certain that it's consistent with everything that Yahowah has to say. So it was the only program where I went through the material that we're going to cover in advance of the program. Otherwise, I avoid doing so, because I think that the spontaneity of all of this, particularly after I've taken the time to write all these books, made them freely available to you so you can look at what I had previously considered and learned and shared in writing. But the beauty of this program is it is extemporaneous. It's largely even impromptu. And I think there's a genuineness that comes through with that, particularly when you're talking about the single most important topic in the universe, the preservation of our souls. So the reason I'm able to do that is that after 24 years of being exposed to Yahowah and of learning from him, I've come to know him very well. I've become very comfortable around him. I've learned a great deal from him. And I'm now in a position to be able to share what it is that he wants his children to know. So that's the purpose of matzah. We seem to have a whole lot of people who are desirous of creating the impression that they are seeking to be with God, when really what they're trying to do is resolve their discomfort with themselves. And I'm here to tell you there's only one way that can be done, and that is to completely expose yourself to what Dod is offering. When Dod took away our guilt and brought it into Sheol after fulfilling the role of the Passover lamb. Because then there is nothing in you other than that which is right. A celebration of our life together with Yahowah. And then, of course, we transition through that third step along the way, which is Bikurim, where we are brought into God's family, allowed into his home. We have become immortal, which means we have transitioned from physical mortal beings to non-mortal beings, non-physical beings, to being enveloped and transformed by that fiery light, such that we are eternal, just like light is eternal. And then we are perfected. There's no more darkness in us. This light completely envelops the darkness. And we're empowered and enriched by that as we enter God's family as his children, inheriting all he has to give, where now it is our Father's responsibility to raise us, empower us, enrich us, enlighten us, enable us, which is precisely what he does. Now, the next step along the way is Shabuah. Now, Shabuah is a place where the standing and mature grain are harvested. You want to be part of the Shabuah harvest, then we are told explicitly that it is a Bikurim harvest, which means you need to understand precisely what Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim represent. You need to understand how to observe them, and you need to know who fulfilled them and for what reason. Something that was unknown to the world prior to God explaining it to me and me sharing it with you. But even then, it is of standing wheat, of standing grain, mature. Which means you can't be one of these that is having all sorts of conniption fits over who you are, who we are, where we're going, what God is saying, who he has chosen to work with, who he stated he would speak through. You're either with us or you're not in this regard. And it is a harvest only of mature, not immature grain. And of course, when you look at a harvest like grain, it is the kernel stripped of the chaff, is it not? And the chaff is blown away. Are you comfortable being stripped of your chaff before God? Because if you're not, you will not be part of that harvest. And God clearly assigned an individual that is responsible for cultivating this harvest. And what we are learning is that he is as responsible for issuing the invitation based upon God's terms as he is for keeping the chaff out. Now, this leads to the most extraordinary time in all of human history. 8 years from now, we will be celebrating Chag Matzah. And Chag Sukah. Dode fulfilled Chag Matzah 2,000 years ago. And because of that, we'll be in a position to celebrate Chag Sukah. And Chag Sukah is all one integrated event, just as Chag Matzah is one integrated event that includes Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. Chag Sukah is Teruah, Kippurim, and Sukah. And so that fifth step along the way is Teruah. It is both a gleaning and it is a sacrifice. It is therefore Pesach and Matzah and Bikurim all combined into a day. There's only really one difference, well, maybe a couple of differences between what happens on Teruah versus what happens on Pesach and Matzah and Bikurim. And again, keeping in mind that Teruah is integrated into Kippurim and Sukah. The differences are to benefit from Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. You have to be invited by God and to choose him. There will be many people who benefit from the second aspect of Teruah, whom Yahweh will have his spirit pick up, but have never responded to God prior. Another difference is because of the imminent return of Yahweh and the nature of the sacrifice. The sacrifice of the Anima Parah on Teruah, according to Bamidbar, Numbers 15, is only capable of expunging the religious and political guilt of those who have been wronged by omission but not commission. They have been misled, but they have not misled. Know the difference between the two. We've witnessed a lot of that recently. It's one thing to be led out of the garden, out of the covenant. It's another thing to vomit all over yourself in such a way that you mislead others. Huge difference between the two. The sacrifice of the Anima Parah will not resolve that second. Those who are gleaned will be those who have accepted what Dode did. They will have made a conscious decision based upon understanding what Dod offered through fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim, and that's why they will be part of the Teruah gleaning. But those who are left behind in Jerusalem and those who are gathered from around the world and brought to Jerusalem at this point by Yahweh will be those who have been misled by religion and politics, conspiracy, to the point that they don't know Yahweh. They don't know the terms and conditions of the covenant. They don't know the purpose and the nature of each of the 7 steps we walk to God to live with him in perfection. They don't know these things. But at least they are potentially open to them, which is the whole story of Numbers 19 with the Adamah Parah and Numbers 5 with the adulterous woman. That's what Teruah is all about, is God then transforms the entire earth to the conditions of the Garden of Eden while eliminating all foes of his chosen. They'll all be exterminated. Now, that doesn't mean they will all die, because many will not. But they'll all be gone, one way or another. And those whose souls endure eternal separation in what is essentially a black hole. There's no torture. It's just in eternity away from the light. They will have chosen their fate, because they will have been actively pursuing in a negative way the restoration of God's people and the means that Yahweh has ascribed to make that possible. And let's not kid ourselves. Had Yahweh and I not collaborated together, and I realize I'm this and Yahweh is that in our collaboration, but nonetheless, he works through people. He never works alone. And had we not collaborated together, and he not prepared me for what we're doing now, there would be no Shavuot harvest. There would be no Teruah gleaning. There would be no sacrifice of the Adamah Parah. There would be no white chariot arriving in Jerusalem filled with candidates to be purged, because there would be no means to purge them. There would be no return of Dod. There'd be no reentrance and readmittance into Gan Eden. The earth would cease to have any value. It would simply be destroyed. It's a lot at stake here. And prior to our collaboration, no one knew any of these things. That's why to go from just saying, I don't want to be part of this anymore, which is just fine. Your soul will cease to exist, but no big deal. It's not a punishment. To vomiting all over this so as to distract others from it becomes an egregious offense that cannot go without recompense. So you vomit yourself right into Sheol when you do such things. And the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah can't fix that. So this leads to the day when Yahweh returns with Dod, and now the children of Israel, having been purged of that guilt inside of them, rather than vomiting all over themselves and telling God to go away and to shut up, are going to be receptive to him. This is why the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah in conjunction with Yahweh's return is so essential. It solves that problem. And then on the 7th step along the way, we re-enter Eden. Sukah is all about returning to the garden. About 2 weeks ago, Leah and I began to speak of this realization that Sukah and Eden, Gan, the garden, are one and the same, that there's no distinction between them. It's the entire purpose of Sukah is to bring us back into the Gan garden. And what I just shared with you a few days ago as we were approaching Sukah is that Gan is garden, is based on Ganan, which is a protective covered enclosure. And Sukah is based on Sukah, and it is a enclosed and protected shelter. The definitions are identical, not by chance. They are synonymous with one another. So if you want to know what God is offering and where he is bringing us to, you need to understand where we began in Gan Eden. And you need to appreciate the lessons of Gan Eden if you want to be able to enter the garden again on Sukah in year 6000 Yah. That is the single most important teaching I can provide on Sukah. So since we've had more women claim that they are seeking modesty and yet being exceedingly immodest, and not just choosing not to be part of this covenant family and of precluding themselves entrance from the garden and participation in the fulfillment of the next 4 Mow'ed Miqra. They have picked a fight. They have each come out spewing all sorts of vile nonsense, thoughtless nonsense, emotional responses to personal problems that they are suffering from because of whatever is still lurking inside of them. And so I want to share a little bit about the garden. It says they don't seem to get it. They think that I'm doing something to them when I didn't pick this fight. I have never once talked to this woman named Anne. Never once. Never. I don't even think I even had an email with her in this entire time. If I did, it was so unmemorable. I have no recollection of it. I don't think I've ever had an email with the newest prisoner of the darkness. Never spoken to her on the phone. Never. In terms of response to posts, I was always kind, uplifting, supportive, without exception. Never said anything, even behind their back, quietly, that would be anything other than kind and supportive. And they chose to be vile. They picked the fight. I very seldom, if ever in my life, have picked a fight. But I've never cowered and walked away from one either. So let's talk about the garden, since they don't seem to understand it, and they don't like the metaphor that God is painting, because God clearly is telling us that he's taking us back to the garden. So why would he say that if he wasn't trying to encourage us to learn something from the garden? And I've always begun by saying, you have to recognize that in the garden, there was no religion, no politics, no conspiracy, no anti-Semitism. But that is not the whole of it. Those things are obviously true, and that's profound. That means that religions are leading the faithful away from the garden, not to the garden, because they will all be excluded from the garden. That's pretty powerful. And that means that those who are overtly political are not leading people to paradise, but away from it. So that means that everyone who is overtly political and overtly religious will be absolutely, and without any further ado or discussion, absolutely, totally, and unequivocally excluded from eternal life with Yahweh, participation in his covenant, or entrance into Gan Eden. This did not exist in the garden then, and it's not going to exist going forward. I've made a big deal trying to create separation. You see, the covenant is about separation. It's based on the verb karat. It is to cut. And it is essential that I continue to honor God's intent and to create separation so that you're either set apart unto Yahweh or you're set apart from him. Okay? So let's consider the conditions of the garden. When Yahweh created Adam for the garden, and he had a marvelous relationship with Adam, and he gave Adam a set of instructions, as loving fathers do, and say, everything here is for you. You can eat whatever you want, actually. But there is a tree over there. If you eat of it, your life will end as you know it. That was really the instruction. And they had a marvelous time together. They walked through the garden together. They explored various forms of life together, learned the nature of the various animals. God was very interested in showing Adam the life forms that he had created and brought them all into the garden and allowed Adam to relate to them, which means we'll likely be able to communicate with animals going forward in Gan Eden and enjoy them even more than we can enjoy them now. That's why when somebody says, our pets get to come to us in eternity, I said, well, what was the nature of God's experiences? He outlined it in the garden. Pretty obvious that he's not going to change. He loves life. And he loves it when we relate to life. And then God realized that if Adam, who he had created to be a companion, and who would have died in isolation, humans can't survive isolation for long periods of time, that he realized that Adam was put in a position where he really had no choice, that free will did not exist for Adam if Adam's only choice was to be with Yahweh or to suffer and die in isolation. That's not a genuine relationship. That doesn't put humankind in a position where we can reciprocate God's love. And so Yahweh said, I think that's right that I create a companion for Adam that can support Adam and be like Adam. And he created Chawah. And Chawah was there actually to be of support for Adam. The relationship was with Adam, the man. Yahweh presents himself as masculine throughout his testimony and as our father throughout his testimony. And he clearly is more comfortable in his relationship with men. Don't say that to be sexist, because I'm not. I love women. And I uplift women and I support women. I defend women. Far more so than probably any man you have ever known. But there is the obvious reality that Yahweh created Adam for a relationship. He didn't create Chawah for a relationship with him. He created Chawah for a relationship with Adam. There really are very few women in God's story that Yahweh has a relationship with. His relationship was with Abraham, and he certainly liked Sarah, talked about Sarah, encouraged and helped Sarah. But the relationship and 99% of the conversation was with Abraham. And the son, not daughter, was Ishak. And his sons, not daughters, were Jacob and Esau. And although there was a daughter among the 12 children of Jacob, Israel was comprised of the sons, was it not? They weren't much to draw to. They were bad boys, but nonetheless, that was how the relationship progressed. You have a lovely story and Deborah, but even she went to a man to carry out what she thought needed to be done. You have a really lovely story in Ruth. Your people are my people. Your God is my God. It's a really lovely story with Ruth. There's a nice story with Hannah. story of Esther is all completely made up by the rabbis. It doesn't exist in terms of any relationship with Yahweh. There really are very few. Maybe because Yahweh is so masculine in his orientation, in the sense of, as he explains it, reason over emotion, that he's more comfortable relating through men. And if you look at the history, the movers and shakers, Abraham, before Abraham, Noah, actually Adam first of all, then Noah, and then Abraham, and then Yishak, and then Jacob, and then the 12 sons of Israel. And we come then to Moshe. He didn't go to Miriam, did he? Could have. But he went to Moshe, didn't he? We don't even know how Miriam and Aaron got out of Mitzrayim, do we? We don't even know hardly anything about them. We just know that Miriam was able to lead the chorus of the Song of the Sea, and then she went AWOL. So she appeared to be part of the covenant, and then she obviously wrote herself out of it and was divorced by God, which we're seeing a lot of right now because she was bitter.
And that is my experience with these women. They are bitter.
It is not redeeming. So you continue through the story. It's Moshe. And when Moshe failed, good God, can you imagine being so desperate for somebody to stand up and stand with you that you'd have to go to Aaron, who was just an absolute horrible human being?
And Miriam.
But that's what happened. And then, we progress along the way, and we find Yahweh working through Yosheb ben Nun, another man. And then we find him working through Shamuel, whom he referred to as a judge because, well, he was judgmental, extremely rational. And then he would reach out to and anoint God's beloved son, not his daughter, Dod. And then you look at the prophets whose names we know. If you look at Ruth, is a wonderful story, but not a prophet. And you look at those who actually wrote, so that we have a written legacy of what they had to say. They were all men, weren't they? God loves women. Absolutely, unequivocally. And
he loves smart women.
Yeah, he does. But the fact of the matter is, God relates with and through men. You can say, well, it's being unfair here. I'm just telling you the way the story is told to us. And God is so exposed in his own story, where he tells everything, the good, the bad, the ugly, the beautiful.
Warts and all, baby.
He presents every aspect of creation as it, and then the story of the garden, and then the necessity of him lamenting that he created humankind because of the flood. He talks about the degradation of Chawa and the what happened as a result. He exposes all of it. He shows how he himself failed when he tried to speak to the children of Israel, didn't he? And yet he fills all of this with prophecy such that he proves his existence and that he is God and that he inspired these texts. And yet when we read these texts, that's the conclusion we come to. So if you're going to follow a woman, you're not following Yahweh. Let me say that again. If you are following a woman, you are not following Yahweh, because Yahweh chooses to lead through men. That doesn't make a woman any less than a man, because the men that Yahweh chooses to lead through respect women. What did Moshe do with the women at the well? He risked his own life in support of them. When Miriam went and attacked Moshe because of his wife, which is prophetically of how they would attack me through my wife, what did God do? He came to her defense. Not Miriam's defense, to the wife's defense. God is telling you how it is. You will not find anywhere in the Torah, the prophets, the Psalms, where God said, I am empowering this woman. I want you to listen to her. I am speaking through her. I want you to follow her. Even when there is a woman who realizes that the Israelites are being enslaved and abused by this terrible man, and says, we need to stand up against this terrible man. To make it happen, a man was involved. And a man is the one that actually led the assault against him.
Mm-hmm. In the same way that when I figured out Larry Hendricks was a very bad person, I brought it to you.
Yes, you did go
Because
against.
Yahweh's men protect their women.
That is correct.
That's the natural order of things, kids.
Yes.
And if you are following a woman, you might be following her right into Sheol.
You were brave and correct to recognize that conspiracy cult. And by the way, Larry has, of course, joined with Dee in their new Mommy Goddess conspiracy cult. You were wise to recognize how evil that was and how inappropriate that was. And as a matter of fact, your break from that cult was that you witnessed Larry lure women in based upon him pretending that he had created these translations that were mine, just like Dee has subsequent done, and just like Dee had lured women in. And then he abused those women that he had let in, just as the Mother Goddess cult is doing now. He sucked them in based upon pretending that what he knew was his insights as opposed to mine.
By wearing you like a human suit.
Wearing me like a skin, just as Dee has done, and then abused everyone that came in because why? He was a psychopath, just as is Dee. And so when you recognize this was the case, and your goal wasn't so much to stand up for yourself, it was to stand up for the women that you saw him abusing.
Yep.
And what you did is you went to a man that you thought you could trust that would stand up for women.
And I asked you one word. It all hinged on one word. BN. Understanding.
Yeah.
I said, to get this, you're going to have to muster all your BN.
Yes. And we did.
Yeah.
We stood up against the man that was abusing women. But you can't change the reality.
Nope.
Yahweh presents himself as a father. Every pronoun that he uses and every verb describing his actions and his speech are all masculine singular. Period. He only presents himself as our father, never as our mother. And he chooses to work through men. Now, you think God's pretty bright? You know, when God said, I chose Dode, and I chose him for reasons that are different from the reasons that men choose other men or that people choose other people, you think that God's really stupid and he doesn't know what works? Do you think he chose Dode because he'd be a mess and that he couldn't accomplish anything with him? Or did he choose Dode because he said, that's a guy who can think it through. He's going to be able to figure it out. Yeah, we'll have some stumbles along the way, but he will figure it out. And in the end, he will do the right thing for the right reason. I know it because I know the very fabric of this man, the character of this man, even when he's 8 years old. And that's what he chose. When God said that he was going to reclaim his own, that he was going to reintroduce his name to his people, that he was going to make the commitment such that his people finally came to appreciate what his son Dod had accomplished by fulfilling Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim. For the first time, understanding the conditions of the covenant. For the first time, being able to walk to that path through the Mow'ed Miqra to return to Eden. He told you who he was going to choose. And it was a Nakri, masculine, male, singular. And a choder,
Not a wasp.
masculine, singular. All the way through, he told you who he was going to choose, and he told you how he was going to work with them. He told you when this was going to happen. He told you how to respond to him, not her. If you're in a cult where the woman is the leader, you
You're
are
screwed.
not with Yahweh. Do you understand that? Let's be really clear, because Yahweh was. You're dealing with somebody who, just like Miriam, is trying to lure you in because she wants you to suffer the same fate. She knows her fate. And just like Satan knows he is off to Sheol, and the more he can lure into Sheol, the better. All right, so let's go back a little bit to Eden. Yahweh created a relationship with Adam. He was enjoying his relationship with Adam, but he didn't think it was fair to Adam to put Adam in a position where Adam didn't actually have a choice, but to spend time with Yahweh. So Adam created Chawa for Adam, not for himself. And somewhere along the way, Adam chose to listen to and respond to Chawa rather than to Yahweh or Yahweh's instructions. He started listening to the woman rather than leading the woman, rather than teaching Chawa what he had learned in his relationship with Yahweh, rather than being a man. He let Chawa take charge, and Chawa created the first mother goddess cult. When you listen to what Chawa said, when she was perverting and twisting Yahweh's testimony to serve her own interests, she wanted to be a goddess. She is absolutely symbolic of what has become the mother goddess cult that has lured and is continuing to lure so many to their demise.
She wanted Adam to worship her.
Chawa wanted to be a goddess. She wanted to be just like God, better than God.
Kinda
And
like
so she
them.
twisted the testimony of God to suit that agenda. Now, prior to that time, we are told explicitly that Adam and Chawa were naked, and they were not the least bit embarrassed or shamed by it. Do you know why? Because when they were listening to Yahweh and not corrupting his testimony and not working against him, they felt open. They were exposed to Yah, and they felt very comfortable in his presence. They felt energized and empowered and enriched
Nothing to hide.
by him. There was nothing in them to hide.
Yeah.
But what happened? The moment they chose to twist Yahweh's instructions, the moment it was the woman who Adam started to listen to and respond to rather than to Yahweh, what happened? They immediately felt naked and exposed. And what was Yahweh's first comment? Because they were running away from him, the God that had been so good to them, the God that was offering them such a wonderful life. All of a sudden, they were trying to hide from. Why were they trying to hide from? The same reason the children of Israel during the Exodus says, "Go away, God, we never want to see you again. We never want to hear from you again," because they wanted to hide from him. Why? Because they didn't have a clue about what God was actually offering, and they chose to twist it. And the moment they chose to twist God's testimony, and it was then regurgitated through the woman as opposed to the reason of the man. It all fell apart, and they knew they were rotten. They knew they had gone astray. They knew that there was something in them that they needed to hide. So what did they do? They tried to cover themselves. What was God's first question?
Who told you you were naked?
Who told you you were naked?
I know that. Who told you that you were naked?
The woman.
Mm-hmm.
So as we have this uprising against what I have learned from Yahweh, what I have shared from Yahweh, over this need never to be exposed, to be modest, to be covered, to not be naked. We've returned to the story of the garden, haven't we? God turned everything that he has shared with us in the Torah. He has made it a prophecy specifically about our time, about this moment, so that we could explain it to you, so that you are not the next one out the door. Listen to what God said. Listen to that story. Process it. If you are in that cult led by that woman, you are not with God. She has taken you away. She has filled you with thoughts that cause you to feel naked with God, such that you can't enter the garden, so that you can't be part of his family, so that you can't be part of these harvests, so that it's over for you.
Naked and ashamed.
What did Adam and Chawah do after they were first questioned by God? They lied.
Yeah.
They lied to themselves. They lied to God.
And each other.
They lied to one another. They lied to themselves. They lied to God. That is what they did. What is the mommy goddess cult doing? All the same things.
Wouldn't you know?
How did God respond? This is how it's going to be for you. You're out of the garden right now. And you're going to endure what you dished out. I'm going to treat you really fairly. Based upon what you have said, that is exactly what you're going to suffer and endure. God's always fair. But understand, they were never allowed back into that garden. They were precluded from learning anything, even from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
They were never given access to the tree of lives. They were outside, fending on their own, and they did really poorly on their own. Their lives were miserable, as you can tell from the very names that Chawah chose for her sons.
A waste of life.
So that's the story. That is the story that we are seeing manifest again. So let me go back to the beginning. Yahweh has provided us with a set of instructions. You can choose to accept them, reject them, or alter them. Those are your choices. If you accept them and you act upon them and you live with them as God articulated them through the means that God has used to convey them, you have the opportunity to respond intelligently and be part of the covenant, to be part of God's family, to re-enter Eden. If you reject them, just because, well, you don't want to listen to the person that God has chosen to convey his instructions through. You don't like some aspect of the instruction. You don't like being exposed to God. Then, should you just walk away? Which, guess what, didn't happen. Adam and Chawah didn't just walk away. What did they do? What happened to every one of these mother goddess cultists? Rather than just walk away and say, I feel uncomfortable in that, what did they do? Blah! And they didn't just blah over themselves. They chose to take the notoriety that God has ascribed to our collaboration together and spew all of their vile right over that, to capitalize on what we had worked to achieve for 23 and 24 years and to poison all of it. Just like Adam and Chava spewed poison all over themselves on the way out of the garden because they couldn't do it. Couldn't handle it. So we have a post today that's on the top of my Facebook page, Craig Wynn Facebook page, that shows an illustration that a woman did who was the most recent to do this to herself. She's all whiny. He said, you either have to walk away or Craig's going to condemn you to darkness and hell. No, I'm not. You're going to do that to yourself if you can't walk away quietly. You're going to attack what God has said. You're going to try to twist it. You're going to lie to yourself and to others, even to God. There's a consequence for that. And that is you're excluded from the garden and you're never coming back. And if you throw up such that your vomit negatively affects God's people, negatively affects what God is trying to achieve through his chosen implements, then there is a consequence for that. And that consequence is Sheol. No torture there. You will not have been sent there unless you chose it. And you now know the way that it occurs. So I think it's rather important that we get back to basics. God's story begins in Eden and it ends in Eden. If you don't like Eden, you won't be there when we return. You see, the job I have been given is not just to encourage a harvest. It is to discourage those who do not belong. God's not looking for a large number of people. He's looking for thoughtful, judgmental people who are right about him. The world's filled with people who are wrong.
Yep.
They don't belong.
And I'm happy to discourage them.
And so our goal is that we will continue to double down. We want to make it absolutely certain that if you are uncomfortable being around Yahweh, because you're uncomfortable with some aspect of Eden as it was and as it will be, then you do not belong. And we want to make certain that we don't make a horrendous mistake and include you when you should not be included. So we will continue to corrupt. We will continue to poke, to agitate, to be extremely blunt and bold on who God is and what he is offering, so that if you do not belong, you will exclude yourself.
My love, if I may.
And you will announce that you have excluded yourself as all of them have done.
Mm-hmm. If I may. The Miqra are invitations to a party to meet with Yahweh, correct?
Also,
in many of those Miqra, we have a set menu. A ram, a bull, and a goat. Well, if you spit in the face of the bull, do you really expect that it will be there to, erase your sins? I don't think so.
The final of the three animals that God has picked as metaphors, and by the way, nudity is a metaphor in the garden.
Mm-hmm.
He's not saying that we're going to be naked going forth into Eden. What he is saying is that if you can't be naked in front of God, exposed in front of God, and be comfortable, if you can't do what I'm doing right now,
you don't belong.
Then you don't belong. I am exposed more to you right now than anyone who has ever posed nude.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the reality of it. And so you need to be able to think these things through as opposed to react emotionally and then to twist God's message. And so when he chose a bull for the personality type at the end, bulls are not known for their tolerance, are they?
No, they're pretty direct, straightforward. And they don't play games.
They don't back down, do they?
No, hardly.
You ever seen a bull back down?
No, not
No.
even to a
Well, they
sparrow.
do have them back down now. They've got a whole series of AI generated. I thought, the first time I saw it was pretty amazing that this cat jumped on this bear and saved a baby. And then there's like 12 of them. And so you say, okay, it's all AI generated. And there are certain circumstances. Well, I'm sure there's probably now a cat that has chased away a bull from the bull goring a baby in the last moment. But the fact of the matter is that bulls don't back down. God was looking for somebody who wouldn't back down. And I'm not going to back down. And I will continue to charge. And we will charge for every last moment that we have. We will continue to be bullish on all things that pertain to Yah. But we are going to trample down and keep out all things that don't. And so I want you to know that we are returning to Eden. If you don't like it there, you're not going to like it as we go back. And our job is to keep Eden from having people in it who will make life miserable for the rest of us. So, my friends, Sukah is gone. Gone is Sukah. The story is from gone to gone. Most people have excluded themselves and will simply pass away into nothingness. And there are many who have been so busy, so miserable with themselves that they find a need to exclude others, to make others as miserable as they are.
To make their little cult of nothingness and stillborn children.
They will find themselves far worse than excluded.
Yes.
But mind you, while I'm going to honor Yahweh's intent, and I'm going to do exactly as he is instructed in the role that I play in this regard, he can count on me to be steadfast and to be loyal, to be consistent and to be right. And I will do nothing more or nothing less than his instructions require. But the more we study his instructions in this regard, he has delegated this responsibility not to his beloved son, but to his son's Bashar, who isn't holding the staff as much as he is holding the rod. And I will do my job. And you will have earned whatever fate becomes you. Now, I will say to those who have been really rash and who have vomited all over themselves, that I am not in a position today where I'm going to judge whether or not what you have already done has earned you an express ticket that is irrevocable to Sheol. I think there are some in the most recent breakaway cult. By recent, I mean it only broke away about a year ago. That the ringleader of it, I don't think there's any hope that she will ever be able to escape the fate of Sheol. Hardly. And I think it is well deserved. And when I say that, you need to know that I don't say it with vindictiveness, because I was kinder to that woman than any man ever in her life. I did more to support her, to protect her, than any man in the history of her miserable life. No one was kinder to her.
According to her words.
And even by her own admission, that no one was ever as supportive or as kind as I was to her. And I was repaid by this vitriol from her. So she has done this to herself. I had nothing to do with it. And all she has done ever since is she couldn't walk away. What she had to do, because she was so miserable, she had to spend the next year of her life trying to tear down everything that she had once supported, that she once knew, that she once recognized was true.
And loved.
And she has spent the next year of her life dismantling it all. Why? The answer is obvious. I hope you can figure it out. I hope you will not be the next victim. But I can assure you there will be many. Just as there was a great rebellion against Moshe, and another great fracture in the family and rebellion against Dod. The same is true for the final witness, and we are witnessing it now. I share this with you because those who have just begun their journey to the dark side have the opportunity to stop,
Walk away.
to just walk away. And by the time we reach Judgment Day, maybe there is a release from what they have done. Likely so. But if they don't, if they do what the Mother Goddess has done and her enablers have done, and spent an entire year trying to demean and denounce everything that God has said, they will have written their fate, and it will be nothing anyone can do to stop it. So that's the reason I'm sharing this with you, and I'm sharing it with you on Sukah, because Sukah is a return to the garden, and very, very few will get that distinction, that honor, to be back exposed, listening to Yahweh, and listening to Yahweh teach us through the men of his choosing.
If I may, to the women of the covenant and those who call themselves covenant but are not. Remember, there are two women in this story. The good woman and the one that's not. Which one will you be?
The whore of Babylon. Now, there is a very distinct message. I can't say it's a distinct message because really until the last month or so, I missed it. So it's subtle. But the overwhelming majority of those who are cleansed and prepared to enter Yahweh's presence on Teruah for Kippurim and Sukah are women. And God reveals that because men have been so bad, that by comparison, he's going to give the women a break. And so I would encourage you, if you are not already covenant because you have made the right decision in your mind, you've come to know the truth, you've come to act upon it, you know where the 7 Mow'ed Miqra lead. You know that the terms of the covenant and benefits of the covenant and the Mow'ed Miqra are synonymous. They're one and the same. You know that Gan Eden and the celebration of Sukah are one and the same. And that you've chosen to listen to Yahweh and respond favorably to him. This is wonderful. If you are just out there in the blogosphere lost, but not actively working against God's people, his message, you're not overtly religious or political, then particularly as a woman, because of all of the harm that men have done to you over the ages. That's one of the reasons we get into this, be free in front of Yahweh's presence. Don't buy into the religious idea that women must be modest, that women must be somehow clothed from here to their ankle. Don't buy into that, because this is men manipulating women for their own control. And it's a horrible thing. You see it in Islam where women wear tents. We see it in Judaism where women have essentially no rights and must shave their heads and must be
covered from here to there
and everything else. Can't even show their shoulders. Have to be segregated from men, even in religious settings. Have to have a separate area that they can approach the damn stones of the wall. And in Christianity, where it says, husbands, lord over your wives, don't buy into it. And if you are into it, shake it. You need to get rid of that gunk so that Yahweh can look at you and you can be comfortable being exposed to him. It's essential that you scrub that garbage from you. Yes, it is a metaphor. It is a profoundly important metaphor. And we're going to continue to drive that metaphor home so that more people are not led astray, victimized by those who would spew their vomit all over themselves and everyone else. Eden is a vomit-free zone. And so I thank you for listening. We'll return hopefully later today with a second program on Sukah. Today is a special day. Kara, who is a little furry bundle of joy, a smaller,
puppy.
Younger, prettier and feminine version of Wookiee is showing up today. Shannon is bringing her here. And we are positive that Asher is going to be absolutely delighted because Asher loves everyone.
She loves playing mommy too.
Yes, and she loves playing mommy, and Asher's just going to have a lovely time. And we're hopeful that Wookiee realizes this is a little girl, and therefore someone for him to love and not to have to be all Wookiee-ish over. And so we're going to introduce them.
To lord over her,
this
Wook.
afternoon. We're going to celebrate Shannon being here as he continues his tour of our family from sea to shining sea. And so this afternoon will be filled with that sort of thing. So if we don't get another program in, you'll understand why. We
have a house guest.
We have a house guest. And,
or two.
We, as you saw with the fire, these last celebrations, we live in a wonderful place. We celebrate our relationship with Yahweh. Our home is his home is our home. And we're kind of having a foretaste of what Eden is like, even as we live here in this environment. And so celebrating life is part of this responsibility. And I want to tell you, there are certain days where it's tough to do this job. And you need to be recharged, and you need just to enjoy life as Yahweh intended it and family as Yahweh intended it. And so this afternoon and evening is one of those times. Thank you all for listening. You have a wonderful first day of your celebration of Sukah. Good night.
Shalom.